The Atari ST wasn't just a great games computer. It also had a good range of software apps that were available. And in this video I'm going to look at some of the apps I used early on with it. So starting off with the Tor application that came with the machine. Bearing in mind that many users coming new to the ST would never have used a Windows GUI type operating system, the Tor goes through the basics of using a GUI, in this case on a gem-based computer. The Tor went through how to use icons and the trash can, menu options and information pop-ups, how the disk drive listing worked and how to change the information listed there, and also how to resize a window and scroll around its contents. The earliest common GUI-style computers were the Mac, Amiga, Sun Workstations, Xerox, then later on, early versions of Windows on PC compatibles. So unless you had already used one of these computers, then a GUI could be quite new to you at the time. How to use this type of computer interface seems obvious now, but back then it was quite groundbreaking. The Tor included exercises on how to click the mouse, how to point at things and select them, and also how to use the mouse in a precise way, dropping objects through holes. It was a long way from my ZX81, my previous computer, and all very interesting back so long ago. Also bundled with the ST came a word processor, First Word Plus. I'm showing the French version here, but the English version was similar. Fonts were limited but had italic and bold options. Along with the word processor, most people would buy a printer, and the cheapest options were dot matrix printers. These were slow and made an incredibly loud screeching noise as they printed. But it was enough, and I used this program a lot to write letters, print CVs and covering letters for job applications. I didn't have the thermal printer available for the ZX81, but this was obviously a way better setup. You could save your documents onto floppy disk. No more messing around with cassette tapes. Those days were over. Also bundled with the computer came ST Basic. This was a much richer version of Basic than my ZX81. It also ran considerably faster. It had commands for accessing the ST's sound and graphics capabilities, and also for using its graphical user interface. But the core commands were the same, and it was a fairly easy transition from the earlier 8-bit computer versions of BASIC. Being able to save to a floppy disk was a huge improvement, and being able to create backup copies of programs easily with the operating system to floppy disk was much better than having to use multiple cassette tapes. But a bit sadly to say, for me I didn't use it all that much. By now I was programming in Turbo Pascal at work, and other Pascal variants, and BASIC seemed like a backward step. Borland's programming environments were way better. I didn't really feel like going home and writing BASIC in the evenings. Also the ST had many fun games to play. But one thing that did interest me was the bundle VT terminal. By hooking this up to a phone modem, I could now connect to the fledgling internet, and Telnet meant computers out across the world were now within my grasp. The ST also had accessories. With these you could play around with system settings, without resorting to peeks and pokes. Change colours, mouse and keyboard settings. One application I bought for the ST was STOS. Seduced by its marketing as a tool for creating games, I thought this would allow me to make games as good as the games software houses were creating for the ST. Quite soon I realised this wasn't the case, and the game demos that came with the package were clearly not as good as the professional games for the ST. I was disappointed and never really got going with STOS, which was a shame. Looking at some of the games people made with it now, it was a pretty good package, and I could have learned a lot if I'd stuck with it. How to use sprite, sound and scrolling backgrounds were all potentially interesting topics. In terms of games programming, they gave me the opportunity to move on from the very limited capabilities of the 8-bit computers, and in particular my ZX81. I didn't take it. Looking at an example STOS game now, Billy Boy, this wasn't a bad game for the time. Okay, maybe not as good as the leading titles, but still fun to play. So that's a look at some of the first ST apps I used. The ST had many more available. Let me know which apps you used on the ST. The ST was a great computer, and I used it for many years, both for games and more serious uses. One day if a remake is released, I may reinvest. 16-bit computers were one of the most interesting eras of retro computing, and one I won't forget. Thanks for watching.